My sister used to play volleyball. She played in about 5th or 6th grade when I was around 8 or 9 years old. The games, in my opinion, were super boring. They played in a high school and on Saturdays typically. One day, during her game, I got bored and decided to wander the high school. I walked upstairs and down the hall. It was a super old high school, and this was back in the late 1990s, so all the classrooms had chalkboards. I wandered into a classroom with the doors open to see writing on a chalkboard that said, "Watch your back." I thought this was a kid doing a prank. I decided to draw a picture on the board and erase the writing. As I began erasing, I heard a noise come from the back of the classroom. I looked behind me to see a kid come from behind a desk and start running at me. I dropped the chalk and ran out of the room. I ran down the hall and back to the volleyball game as fast as I could. After that, I always found the games a little more interesting.
I'm a big sports fan. I often go to games, and last summer I was at a Major League Baseball game in the city near where I live. I went with my friend Sean, who is also a big fan, and our seats were on the first level, sort of down by the first baseline. They were really nice, and the stadium was pretty full with it being a nice summer night. I remember it was about the 7th inning when I checked my phone after I felt it vibrate in my pocket. It was an airdrop request from another iPhone. The name of the phone just said iPhone. I was curious of what it could be, and I chose to accept the airdrop. It was a photo, and the photo turned out to be me. The photo looked really zoomed in, and it looked like it had been taken from the upper deck near the third base line. I thought it was funny, and I showed it to Sean, who also got a laugh out of it. We were wondering if someone who knew us was at the game and just joking around with us. I looked over to the upper deck area, but really couldn't see the people well with them being so far away. I went on Snapchat and looked at my snap maps, but nobody else that I knew was at the game. As the game went on, the next inning, I received another airdrop. This time, it was once again a photo of me zoomed in, but now there was a red X drawn over my face. I thought it was funny again, but also a little bit strange. The next inning, which was the 9th and the last inning of the game, I got another airdrop. It was a video of somebody zooming into me. This time, however, it appeared to be filmed from the same section that I was in and behind me, just about 20 feet or so. I looked around, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. It could have been anyone, and with as many people at the game as there was no way of knowing. The game ended shortly after, and Sean and I walked through the dense crowd back to my car, which was in a nearby parking garage a few blocks away. When we got back to my car and got inside, I was starting up the engine when I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I grabbed it and looked to see another airdrop. It was from the same person, and I accepted it to see that now there appeared to be a note entry. The entry had my name with my address and then had in all caps, "I will get you." I knew that to send an airdrop you had to be close by to the iPhone, and Sean and I looked all around the parking garage. Now this was really creepy. We didn't see anybody, but all of a sudden we saw a car that was parked sort of behind us start to drive away, and the tires screeched as it did. It was a black car with tinted windows, and I didn't recognize it. After it sped away, Sean and I sat in the car for several minutes talking about who it could be that kept airdropping us. We really didn't know of anybody who would pull a prank like that. I didn't end up telling anybody else about it. Luckily for me though, nothing else happened, but I still want to know who that was taking those pictures of me.
This happened back when I was a kid. I think I was maybe 10 years old at the time. I played basketball growing up and would be on a team with a bunch of friends. One Saturday, my team was playing in a tournament at a local high school. In these tournaments, there would be a bunch of teams, and you would usually play about 2 games in a day. So I remember that we played a game in the morning in the high school, and we had some time before our next game, I think a couple of hours. So we were supposed to hang around the school. Most of my teammates were hanging out in the bleachers and watching the other games. I did that for a while, but my friend and I got kind of bored and wandered off. We started basically exploring the school. After walking around for a while, we came into this hallway at one end. We were far away from the gym, and every hallway was completely empty with it being a Saturday. I don't remember what we were doing back there other than just walking around. But in that hallway, I remember this guy came out of one of the classrooms. The lights had been off in the classroom, so I'm not sure what he was doing in there. I didn't recognize him at all either. He just appeared to be some guy, not a teacher or coach or anything. I remember that he approached us and asked us what we were doing back there. We said we were just walking around. I wasn't sure if we were in trouble and not supposed to go back there or what. But then I remember that the guy started basically trying to get us to leave with him. He was asking us to go to his car. We knew better though and said no to him, but he kept trying to convince us. I remember thinking that he had to be joking at first, but after a while I realized he was serious. After he was talking to us for maybe 5 minutes, I remember that out of nowhere we both just turned and ran. We went all the way back to the gym. The man didn't chase after us and stayed where he was. It was pretty weird, and I didn't want to leave the basketball area for the rest of the day. Next to the gymnasium was the cafeteria of the school. There were concessions there and a decent amount of people hanging out. I went back in the gym, and after a while, I went out to get something to eat. When I did, I noticed the man. He was standing very far away in a hallway and looking at me. I remember that I ran back in the gym after I saw him. After that, I didn't see him for the rest of the time there. Sometimes I wonder what the guy was doing there and who he was. I'm really glad that my friend and I just ran away and ignored him.
About 5 or 6 years ago, when I was in high school, I was taking a regular gym class. We would do all kinds of things and would often play games. I remember this one day in the spring, all the snow had melted and the weather had just become warm enough and nice enough for us to be able to go outside. We went out to the back part of the school where the football fields and things were. Behind them, they had an extra football practice field and then a large woods going off the school property. Once we got there, the teacher told us we were going to play Capture the Flag. If you don't know what that is, it's a game where two teams stand on the other sides of a line and have a flag that they guard. Your goal is to try to get to the flag and bring it to your side without being touched, or else you're out. We got into the two teams, and I had one of my good friends, Jake, on my team. Me and Jake are both really competitive, and we came up with a great plan to get the other team's flag. There was a decent amount of people in our class, and we were playing on the field that was next to the woods, so we planned to sneak off into the woods and then make our way through the woods to the other team's side, then pop out right next to their flag. We waited until the teacher wasn't looking, and then we went off into the woods. We had to go sort of downhill once we got into the woods, and then we went kind of deep into there. We did this so that nobody could see or hear us. We walked for probably about a minute to where it was a lot thicker woods. Then we started making our way down. We were trying to be as quiet as we could when Jake tapped me on the shoulder. I looked at him, and he pointed down between some trees about 40 feet away. There was a man standing there. It was really strange to see a man out there, because there was no paths going through this particular woods. It was also very dense and had a long ways before you were out of it. We both looked at the man for several seconds until he looked directly at us. We were trying to figure out what he was doing out there. He had glasses on and a beard and looked to be about roughly 30 years old. After us both staring at each other for an uncomfortable amount of time, the man smiled and then started waving us over to him. It wasn't really a friendly smile, however. It was more of a creepy one. Me and Jake decided to just keep walking and ignore the man. As soon as we walked away, though, we heard the man start to walk at a fast pace through the woods in our direction. We didn't stop to look back, and instead turned to just go as quickly as we could back to where our class was. The way that the man was going towards us kind of creeped us out, and we didn't really care about the Capture the Flag game anymore. We knew once we got back to the rest of the class, the man wouldn't follow us there, whoever he was. We finally made it back to the class, and the man didn't come out. We kept our eye on the edge of the woods though, just to see if he would. The rest of the class went by, and we never saw the man again. After class was over, I went to my next period, which was history. Shortly after class started though, our school went into a lockdown. All of the teachers had to lock their doors, and nobody was allowed to leave. They wouldn't tell us why the school was locked down, and it lasted for about an hour before it finally ended. I finally was able to figure out the reason for the lockdown after some time, and I got word that a man had robbed a bank on the other side of town the previous night and was seen on school property. It turned out to be the same man that we saw in the woods. It was really creepy to look back at that. And when I do, I always wonder what the man wanted when he was waving us over to him. When I was a girl about 9 or 10 years old, I played soccer. That was about 10 years ago now, but I still have a really good memory of it. We used to have games every Saturday morning, which was a fun time because I was on a team with a lot of my friends, and every week after the game, we would hang out at one of our houses. One day, I remember coming out of the game to sit on the bench and seeing a man sitting in a chair by himself watching the game. I didn't recognize him as anyone's parent, and he wasn't really sitting next to anyone. I was kind of curious as to who he was, but pretty soon after that I went back in the game, and I didn't have any more time to care about it. After the game was over, a lot of us went to our teammate Sarah's house. She was an only child, and her parents were pretty chill, so she was our favorite teammate's house to go to. There was about 6 of us at her house. We hung out in her room for a while and then went outside. When we did, I noticed a car parked across the street. It was a brownish silver color and looked pretty average. However, I noticed the man in the driver's seat was looking at us and was the same man from the game that I had seen sitting by himself. I asked Sarah if she knew him, and she said no. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but after a few minutes I realized just how strange it was. After a while we went back inside. We all went back into Sarah's room and decided to watch a movie. About 20 minutes later, we heard a tapping at the window. I looked to see a man smiling and waving from outside the window. It was the same man from earlier. We all screamed, and a couple seconds later her parents came rushing into the room. The man was gone now, but we all told Sarah's father that a man had been at the window. He ran outside and we heard some shouting, but he came back in several minutes later and said that the man had drove away. The police were called and all of us had to go home. I'm really glad it wasn't my house. I don't talk to Sarah much anymore, but I don't believe the man ever came back.
This is something that happened last year when I went to my boyfriend's soccer game. He plays in this league that's not professional or college or anything, but it's still taken very seriously. Most games are at nearby parks depending on who they play. I go there sometimes here and there, and usually there are maybe 20 people that watch. Most of them are other wives and girlfriends like me. One time, the game was at a park that was about 10 minutes away, and it was a night game. I went to watch, and there was a game going on before my boyfriend's, so his game didn't start until about 8:30 p.m. Not very many people stuck around that late to watch it, plus it was kind of cold. I remember that it was also a bit foggy out, and there was just one set of bleachers that I was sitting in. I went and sat at the very top, and there was just a couple of people scattered around at the bottom. The field was surrounded by woods on 3 sides of it. Then, on one end, there was an open field, which led to a small park building. Past that and to the left was the parking lot. So I was sitting up in the bleachers and watching the game. I remember at one point I heard this noise behind me in the woods. It sounded like maybe an animal was moving through it. It had to be pretty loud though in order for me to notice. Being at the top back of the bleachers, I was probably 20 feet above ground and could look back into the wooded area. so I looked out to see what was there. I saw some movement of where the noise was coming from, but I couldn't tell what it was. The soccer game wasn't really that exciting at the moment, so I got up from the bleachers and walked around to look. Once I was there, I could still hear the noise. The woods was very dense, but I could get a better view on the ground than from up in the bleachers. When I got close, the noise stopped. I was looking around, trying to see what it was. It seemed like it was coming from maybe 20 feet in or so. It was very dark back there. Then I just happened to notice there was a man standing in the woods. It was kind of strange because there was no path going in those woods or anything. And the man was also staring right at me. His eyes were real wide, and I walked away when I saw him. I went right back to the bleachers and sat down again. I wasn't sure what the guy was doing there, but it was kind of strange. So I pretty much just watched the game for the next 30 minutes or so. In a break in the action, I got up to use the restroom over at the building. This was a pretty long walk, and nobody else was around. After doing so, I emerged to see the man standing not that far away from me. He was just staring at me again, and standing just outside of the woods, but now all the way over here. I began walking back to the bleachers, and the man remained standing there at first, but then he actually started walking back after me. I remember that he was trailing me almost the entire way back to the field, but he was a good distance behind me. Once I got to the field though, he sort of stopped. Then I got back to the bleachers and continued watching the game. I looked over, but did not see the man anymore. I didn't see him for the rest of the game either. I was a little creeped out by his odd behavior. After a while longer, the game finally ended. My boyfriend and I then started walking back to the parking lot. I remember that when we made it there, we saw this strange man standing near our vehicle. This was just really weird. The guy was just standing there staring at us. We kept walking closer, but I honestly didn't want to get that close to him. When we made it within probably 10 feet of the guy, he just turned and then ran off into the woods. It was very strange. We left after that, but I've always been wondering ever since then what the guy was doing. I work at a baseball stadium part-time during the summers. Last summer, I worked just about every home game. This story takes place one time after we had a night game. One of my duties at work is to help clean the stadium when the game is over. Many times, we will have it ready for another game the very next day. So each of us are assigned a certain section to clean and have instructions on how to clean it. There are so many of us that the entire stadium can be good to go within an hour or two of the game ending. So on this night game in particular, the stadium was pretty busy while the game was going on. After it ended, there's usually an extremely busy time of about 10 minutes. That's when everybody is leaving, and the concourse is usually packed. Then things very quickly start to quiet down. I remember that I was busy between the seats in the section that I was in and the concourse nearby. There was just one other coworker with me in that particular section. I just know that probably 20 minutes after the game, things were much quieter, and I told my coworker that I would go clean the bathrooms on this night. He would stay out in the seats picking up trash that was left there. So I first went into the restrooms and checked, and there was just one person that was in a stall in the men's restroom. Meanwhile, the women's was empty, and as far as the concourse, by now, almost 30 minutes after the game, virtually all fans were gone. There were just a few here and there who were taking their time to leave. I went ahead and cleaned the women's restroom, which took me maybe 10 minutes. Then when I came out, I went to go do the men's. I was sure by now that it would be empty, but there was still a person in one of the stalls. I thought about asking them to leave, but I decided to give it a couple more minutes. So I went out and changed a trash can in the concourse. This took me several minutes, but the man still hadn't left the restrooms. So at that point, I decided to go inside and ask him to leave. When I entered the restroom though, the one stall was still closed, but it didn't look like anybody was inside. I didn't see the feet at the bottom like I had before. I asked if anybody was in there, but I got no response. I announced that I had to clean and then started to do so. When I got to the stall that was closed, I knocked on it one last time. There was nothing in response. I started to wonder to myself if the stall had just been closed the whole time and nobody was in there. After not getting a response, I started to go underneath it to unlock the door. When I did, I saw a man standing on the toilet, luckily fully clothed. He was looking right at me, and it was a huge surprise. I moved back and said that he had to leave now. The man didn't do anything. I asked if he was okay or if he could hear me. He didn't say anything back to me, but a second later, there was a loud bang from the other side of the door. It was like the man was pounding on it as hard as he possibly could. This happened several more times. At that point, I left the bathroom and decided to tell my coworker that was in the area. So I went back out into the concourse and then into the seats. I located my coworker and told him of the problem. At first, he thought it was funny and wanted to talk to the guy. So we both went back and entered the men's restroom. When we went inside though, the man was gone. All of the stall doors were still open. I was happy that he was gone, and then my coworker left to go back to the seats. I finished up and cleaned the rest of the men's room. Then I left and was going to join in helping my coworker in the seats. That would always take the longest. But as I re-entered the concourse from the restrooms, something caught my eye. There was a few things used for concessions that were moved off to the side. One of them was a small fridge. It was a full-sized fridge with Pepsi and other soft drinks in it. I don't know how, but I noticed a man was hiding behind it. When I saw this, I started to walk over. I got within maybe 10 feet, and the man quickly moved out from behind the fridge. Then he ran past me and headed towards the seating area. Now we were on the 100 level, which is the closest to the field. I ran after the guy, and he entered the seating area where my coworker was. The man ran down the aisle and past my coworker. He got all the way to the field, and then jumped over the wall and went onto the playing field. There were a few grounds crew workers out there. The man ran all the way to the outfield before we saw a security guard catch up with him. Finally, he was caught and escorted off the field. My coworker and I both laughed at that point, but it was actually pretty creepy to me before that. I had no clue why the man was hiding in the restroom for so long. I'm not sure why he did that, but it was a memorable night.
This story takes place back when I went to high school. At the time, I was an 18-year-old girl and a senior. I was taking a weightlifting class, which I didn't mind because I played volleyball. It was my third hour class, and I went to it one day to see that we had a substitute teacher. I had never seen this man before, and from the first second I saw him, I immediately got the creeps. I try not to be a judgmental person, but I couldn't help that something just seemed off the first time I saw him. He looked to be about 30 to 40, and was balding with a slight beard. When the bell rang, he announced to us that he was the substitute teacher for the day, and then he made some sort of joke which nobody laughed at. Then he started taking attendance, going down the line that we always stood in. He made some comments to several people, joking with them, and when he got to me, he told me I smelled good in a way that I found slightly inappropriate. After that, he continued to walk down the line. We went on with our normal lift for the daily workout, and I overheard some kids making comments about how they thought the guy seemed weird and wondered how the school found him to teach today. He pretty much stayed out of our way during the workout, however, and sat in the corner. When class was over, we all left. The rest of the school day was very normal. But as I drove home that day, when I was pulling out of the school parking lot, I noticed a car pull out after me and saw that the substitute teacher guy was driving. I found this especially odd because I was leaving from the student parking lot and there was a separate parking lot just for the staff. I told myself maybe he didn't know where to park being a substitute and drove the rest of the way home listening to music and kind of zoning out. But when I pulled into my quiet street, I noticed he was still following me. I had to do a double take, and when I pulled into my driveway, he drove on by. I found it strange and was now kind of creeped out. My street had a dead end on it just about a quarter mile up the road. Sure enough, after I got inside my house, I looked out my front window and saw him driving back the other way. I immediately told my mother, but she said it was likely just a coincidence and to not worry.
But later that night, as I was about to go to bed, I walked through the living room where my mother was watching TV. When I did, I saw a car drive by, but then slow down in front of our house and nearly come to a stop. When I looked closer, I noticed it to be the same car the creepy sub had. I immediately told my mom again, and after she took a look, she called in my dad, who stormed out of the house yelling, and the car immediately drove away. We ended up reporting everything to the school the next day. I'm not sure exactly what happened to the guy, but I was told I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore.
This happened many years ago when I was in high school. At the time, my younger brother was about 14 years old and played in a soccer league. One night, he was playing at a park less than 10 minutes from where we lived, and I went with my parents to watch his game. They had a small bleachers set up, and some other parents brought their own chairs to sit on and watch the game. I went to most of my brother's games because my parents did, and I enjoyed it for the most part, but at times, it would get a little bit boring for me. On this night, it was nice out and the sun was setting. I was sort of bored with the game and got up to walk around. I went around to the other side of the field, which had some trees and a really thick woods nearby. There was an open area around the corner from the woods, and I went there and was just sort of walking around. I was kind of just wandering around the park and was going to head back to watch the rest of the game in a couple of minutes, but I then heard a noise coming from seemingly the middle of the woods. I stopped and looked to see what it could be, assuming it was some kind of animal. It seemed way too dense of woods to really see in there. Plus the sun had just set, and it was getting pretty dark out. I kept looking in the woods, and then started to walk back, and that's when I saw it. There was a guy about 20 feet into the woods, sort of ducking behind a tree. It was not what I was expecting, and my heart started to race when I saw him. I couldn't tell if he saw me looking at him or not, but I decided to just head back to the game now. I was walking back, and made it about 20 feet, when suddenly I felt somebody grab me by the shoulder and yank me backwards. The next thing I knew, I was facing the woods and could see someone grabbing my head and covering my eyes. I struggled and tugged away as fast as I could. I was able to break free just from my first sudden movement, and then ran all the way back to the soccer field, which wasn't very far at all. When I got back to my parents, I was out of breath and told them what was going on. My dad decided to walk to the woods and look around, but he returned several minutes later and said that he didn't see or hear anybody, and the guy was probably long gone. This was a very scary experience for me, and not something I expected at all. That area had always been known as very safe, but ever since then, I tried to stay away from it.
This is the story of my scariest experience going to a sports game. And my team only won 5 games last year. Talk about horror. Anyways, I won't say which team is my favorite, but it's an American football team. The games are always packed, and I'm sure to go to several each year. Because of how many people go to every game, parking can be a bit of a nightmare. I live pretty close by, but not close enough that I can walk or anything. I obviously have to drive. So for this game, I parked sort of far from the stadium. I had researched a little bit beforehand, and I was able to park for free in a Target parking lot. It was a night game, and I arrived about an hour before kickoff. I was meeting a friend there who took an Uber from his work. So after parking towards the back of the Target parking lot, I saw that nobody else going to the game seemed to be parking here. I left and soon got onto a sidewalk. I thought that it was going to take me forever to walk there, but it actually wasn't really that long. By the time I arrived at the stadium, I felt like a genius. I got to park for free, and probably wouldn't have to deal with much traffic afterwards. When I was close to the stadium, I caught up with the huge mob of people that was entering. I was able to find my friend, and then we went inside. We got to our seats and then watched the game. It went by mostly normal. Where things got strange was after the game. So when it was over, I stayed back and talked with my friend for a while. Then we headed for the exits and left. There was still a ton of people around. So my friend and I went our separate ways, and I started walking back to my car. Now, I would say that it would take me about 15 minutes to walk back, maybe 20. At first, there were lots of other people walking along the sidewalk with me. Then, the farther I went, the less people there were. Soon it was just me. I continued to walk, and when crossing a street, I noticed that there was actually one person that was walking behind me. He was a ways back though. I kept going, thinking that I was heading in the right direction of my vehicle. The man behind me continued walking with me. I thought at first that maybe he also parked at the Target or nearby. We kept going, but I soon realized that I had got my directions mixed up. I accidentally went about 2 blocks in the wrong direction. So I took out my phone and I looked up the correct way. Then I was back on track. Several minutes later, things were very dark and quiet, but I could still hear the footsteps behind me. They sounded slightly closer than before. I glanced over my shoulder. The guy was still there walking behind me. It was a little bit weird now because of the fact that I had drastically changed my direction. I mean, why would he still be following me? I just ignored it though. We kept walking, and soon the Target was in sight. By now, it was around 11 p.m., and the Target had closed at 10. My car was basically the only one in the entire parking lot. There were a few other vehicles a long ways away on the other side, but mine was the only one in the area. When I approached, the man was still trailing me, but even closer now. At that point, I was really suspicious. I walked faster and then entered the parking lot. I thought that I heard the guy behind me start to jog, so I did as well. I jogged all the way to my car. I unlocked it from a distance away so that I could get inside quickly. When I had made it within maybe 50 feet of the car, I started sprinting. It was apparent that the man was chasing after me now for some reason. I was probably 30 feet in front of the guy. I reached my car, opened the door, and got inside. Then I locked the doors instantly and started the engine. As I was starting it up, the man reached my car and tried opening it. When it wouldn't, he got about 2 punches in at my driver's window, which held up. Then I quickly drove out of there, leaving the man standing in the mostly empty parking lot. After leaving, I called the police and reported what happened to them. Then I drove back home. Since that experience, I haven't parked in that Target parking lot for a night game. I have for day games though, and nothing else like that has happened. I think that the man was attempting to rob me, either from my car or whatever else I had. I'm not sure why he chose to follow me though. I don't remember seeing him at all during the game or anything, and hopefully I never see him again.
My brother and I both played baseball growing up. I'm a couple years older than him, so we played at different age levels, but we played in the same league, so most of our games were at one park. This happened when I was about 12. On one night, we both had games. Mine started an hour before his, so I got done first. I watched his game for a little while, but then I got the itch to throw the ball around, so I walked to the edge of the park where there was a little woods and an open field. I would often go there and throw a tennis ball against the side of an old hockey rink that happened to be there. As I was throwing my ball against the rink that night, an older-looking man appeared from the woods. He walked out, and I thought this was strange, but for some reason, I didn't mind it too much. The man then walked over to me and said hi. He said I looked like a really good ball player and asked me to show him my throwing form. He told me that he used to do some coaching and that I was a really good player. Then he said that he had a really nice glove in his truck and that he needed to get rid of it. I should have seen how sketchy this was looking back, but at the time I believed him. He told me to follow him and we started to walk towards his truck. We walked kind of around the woods to see a little parking lot with an old beat-up truck in it. I noticed that the man smelled bad like cigarettes and he was starting to give me the creeps. We finally arrived at his truck. He told me that the glove was behind the passenger seat in his truck and I was smaller than him, so I should get in and grab it. I peeked in the truck, but I didn't see any baseball equipment at all. As I leaned in, I felt the man position himself right behind me. This made me a little uncomfortable and I backed away. The man then said, "What are you doing? I told you to get it." I said that I didn't really need a glove and it was all right. He then nudged me and said to get in the truck in a commanding voice. At this point, I knew I was in trouble, and I tried to run away, but the man had grabbed my shoulders. I did the only thing I could think of in that moment, which was to kick him as hard as I could in his shin. When I did, his grip loosened and I was able to free myself. I used that opportunity to run as fast as I could back to where I came from. The man did not chase after me, as I had to have been much faster than him. Unfortunately, I was unable to even think about getting a license plate or anything like that. When I told my parents, they ended up reporting it, but I don't believe anything ever came of it.
For some background to this story, I'm a female, and this event took place when I went to a basketball game with some friends. We were going to a night game at the arena in the city. I carpooled with some friends, and 4 of us went together in total. We took Caitlin's car, which was an SUV, so it had the most amount of space. Now we parked in a parking ramp very close to the stadium, which is downtown in a major city. After arriving, we got to our seats and were watching the game. We had pretty good seats and were sitting in the first level about 20 rows up from the floor. At one point, I don't remember exactly when, I got up to get some food. For some reason, nobody came with me. I don't remember why. Anyways, I went over and was in line, and the guy behind me started hitting on me. He was trying to flirt and stuff, and I really wasn't interested in him. He was taller than me, maybe 6 feet tall, smelled badly, and wore a baggy sweatshirt and a hat. Now, I wasn't rude to the guy, but when he asked me for my number, I told him that I wasn't interested. He left me alone for a short time, but after ordering food, I left to go back to my seats. The guy stopped me and stood in front of me. He asked me where I was sitting and asked if he could sit with me. I told him no, I was sitting with my friends. Then I walked away. He didn't follow me then, but when I got back to my seats, about 5 minutes later, I saw the guy. He was standing in the aisle and he waved at me. Now, there were literally no open seats around us. I didn't think that he was sitting near us, but at first I wasn't sure. The guy was in the aisle, blocking people's view, and I guess trying to find a way to get to us. After standing there for like a minute, somebody told him to sit down. This finally got him to walk away. He went back up the aisle and left the section. I couldn't believe that he had actually come down and tried to sit near us. For the rest of the game, I did not see him. I ended up forgetting about the interaction for the most part. When the game was over, the 4 of us left the stadium. Right outside, there was a large crowd of people who were all leaving the arena like us. In the midst of this, I saw the man again, but not before he saw me. By the time I noticed him, he was already looking at me and walking in my direction. My friends and I then tried to quickly walk away. The man literally followed us all the way to the parking garage. He was trying to talk to me and stuff, but I told him that I was not interested. So we got inside the parking structure and then went inside of Caitlin's car. I didn't notice the man when we were in there, and when we got in the car, I was sitting in the back, and we left. At first, we got stuck in traffic, but it didn't last for very long. During the entire drive back, I was talking with my friends and completely distracted. Now, my apartment is not that far outside of the city, so I was dropped off first. Caitlin pulled over to the side of the road in front of my building. I said bye to my friends and then got out. Then they drove off. Right when I started walking to my apartment, I noticed that another car was pulled over on the side of the road with the lights on. It was behind where we had been. Then the lights turned off and the driver's door opened. As I was walking, I saw the same guy get out. I was so surprised and had no idea where he had come from. He was a ways away, and I did my best to go to the front door of my apartment quickly. He was walking right over to me. I could not believe the nerve on this guy. I made it to the front door and used my key fob to open it. I made sure to close it right behind me so the guy couldn't get in. He tried opening the locked door, but couldn't get in. I went to the elevator and got up to my floor where my apartment was. When I got inside, I looked out of my window to the front sidewalk, but I didn't see the guy leaving. My building was not very big. I would say it's about average size. There's really just a small lobby, and then 4 levels, which are all just a straight hallway. I just hoped that the man wouldn't make it inside. Probably 10 minutes later, though, I remember I checked out of the window again and still didn't see him. I noticed that his car was still there, though. I hoped that he was maybe inside of his car and going to leave for good, but I couldn't tell if anybody was in the driver's seat or not. A short time later, though, I remember randomly hearing footsteps outside in the hallway. Now, it could have been anybody, but for some reason, I had a feeling that it was the same guy, and I went over and looked. I walked to my front door and looked through the peephole. I was just in time to see the guy walking past my door. He didn't look at my door or anything and didn't stop. I'm pretty sure he had no idea which apartment was mine. I decided to try to just forget about this guy. After that, I went to bed. The next day, obviously, he was no longer in the building, and since then, I haven't seen him. I still can't believe that he followed us back, though. We must have just not noticed him. I'm not sure what he would have tried to do if he knew which apartment was mine. Possibly break in or knock on the door. I'm glad I didn't have to find out, though. Many years ago, when I was in high school, my favorite class period was always gym class. Being a high school guy, I played on the basketball team, so gym class was a very easy subject for me. I remember back when we'd often play dodgeball, which is what we were doing on this particular day. It was pretty early in the morning. I think gym was my first or second class of the day. Our school was very old, and the gym was sort of old-fashioned. We had a dodgeball game going on when one of my friends threw a dodgeball at me and missed. It went out the doorway of the gym and into the back corner to a little hallway with a storage closet. That was the back exit to the gym, which really wasn't used anymore because it was a dead end. All that was really back there was a closet. I went through the door and went around to the corner, and then went into the storage closet where the ball had ended up. When I got inside, I saw that most of the lights were off, and it was pretty dark. It was filled with old equipment, that most of it was no longer used. I looked around for the ball and then found it. It had rolled only a few feet in. Then, as I was grabbing the ball, I heard a noise come from the back of the closet. I looked and saw an older woman peeking out from behind a large box and looking at me. She had long, messy, blackish gray hair, and she looked to be insane. It really startled me, and also creeped me out at the same time. I just took the ball and then ran back to class. I told my friend Tom about what I had seen. He seemed interested, so we both decided to go back to the closet together. We walked over and then peeked inside. We didn't see her this time, though. I figured she was hiding behind the box, so Tom reached for the light switch and turned it on. He then walked straight for the box she had been hiding behind. But when he looked behind it, she was gone. We both looked all the way around the room and even went out into the hallway and looked around, but they were both completely empty. There was no other ways to leave this area of the school, and I don't know how the lady could have possibly left. To this day, I still think about it and wonder what happened. Last fall, I went to an NFL football game with my brother. We had seats that were in one end zone, about 50 rows up. There were fans from both teams at the game, and throughout the game, they would occasionally yell at each other. Pretty typical NFL game stuff, but when the game was almost over, things got pretty intense. I heard a fan behind me begin yelling, and I looked behind me to see another fan charging him and then tackle him. The two fans fell over their rows of seats and into mine and began fighting. I did my best to break up the fight and held one man back. The man must have seen I had a jersey on for the team he was against and then punched me in the face. I responded by pushing the man away, and he fell over another row of seats and then began to charge back at me, but was held back. Some of the fans around me reassured me that I didn't do anything wrong, and they made sure I was all right. The game ended shortly after, and my team won.
My brother and I walked out through the thick crowd of people and left the stadium into the city streets. Each block that we walked farther from the stadium, there would be less and less people. We had parked pretty far away because it was cheaper and we didn't mind walking. It ended up being about a 30-minute walk. We got close to the parking garage that we parked in, and when I happened to look behind me, I noticed there was a man following us. It looked like the same man that tried to fight me earlier. He was about 50 feet back. I didn't know if he was following me or if he happened to park where I did. We got into the parking garage and he followed us in shortly after we went. As we approached my car, I heard the man start to yell. He said, "Hey." His yell echoed through the entire parking garage. I ignored him. The man then pulled something from his pocket and threw it in our direction. It was a rock. Then he did it again. He came closer to hitting us. My brother and I quickly got in the car and started the engine. We started to drive off and the man began running and throwing rocks at our car. He hit the car a couple of times but did not break any windows. We pulled out as fast as we could. We were able to drive away, and when we got home, we looked at the car to see several large dents. We called the parking garage and reported the incident, but have yet to hear back from them.
This happened just a few months ago. I went to a park to work out with my friend Mikey. There's a park not too far away from where we live, and it has everything. There's a baseball field, basketball courts, and a playground. There's also picnic tables and several large grassy areas. Overall, it's really big. Sometimes I go there with my friends to play basketball or whatever. On this day, Mikey and I were doing some conditioning in the park. We both play sports and are there all the time. It was a little bit later on this night though, at right around sunset. The park had some lights, but after sunset it would get pretty quiet. So by this time, most of the people had left already. There were a few people here and there spread out, but not that many. The park also had 2 parking lots, one on each end of it. Mikey and I had been running in one of the large grassy areas where there wasn't really anybody else around. When we left, we walked all the way back to the parking lot and got inside of my car. It was sort of a long walk, and after getting back, I realized that I didn't have my phone. I also didn't know where it was. I soon figured out that I likely forgot it where we had been at the park. We would set our stuff down when we worked out, and obviously I wouldn't run with my phone in my pocket. So we got out of my car and started walking back over to see if I had forgot it on the ground. Now, a long distance away, near where we had been, I saw this guy walking. I assumed that he was just passing by, but the guy then looked to the ground near where Mikey and I were. I saw him pick up what appeared to be a phone from the ground, and I knew it was mine. I started to run over to the guy, not wanting him to leave with my phone. But when he picked it up, he turned instantly and started walking in the other direction. I started yelling at that point, but he was still a good ways away. He didn't stop and ignored my yelling. Now I started sprinting at full speed. The guy was walking pretty fast and heading towards the other parking lot. As I kept running and yelling for the guy to stop, he then started running. He sprinted to a car that was parked in the lot and then got inside. I kept running, but he started his engine and drove away before I could reach him. Then I turned and started sprinting back for my car in the other lot. Mikey was about halfway there, and I waved him back. He also saw everything that happened and started running back to the parking lot with me. There was a good chance that the guy would have to drive past the parking lot that we were in. Ours was closer to a more common road, and the other parking lot was kind of the back one. We made it back to my car and got inside just in time to see the guy driving past our lot. I started my car and instantly pulled out and onto the road behind the guy. We kept a distance back, but followed him. I'm not sure if he realized that we were following him or not, but the roads weren't very busy, so it wasn't difficult to keep up with him. We followed him for about 10 minutes until we arrived on a quiet residential street. The man parked on the side of the road in front of a house, and I parked a little ways back. Then he got out of the car, and I got out to confront him. I quickly walked in his direction as he headed towards the house. I yelled at him again, and this time he looked at me. I said that I saw him pick up my phone at the park. He turned away and said he didn't know what I was talking about, and then told me to leave him alone. Then he hurried to the front door and went inside. I wasn't going to try to follow him into his house or anything, but I knew that he was lying to me. Mikey followed me, and we went to the front door after the man went inside. I then rang the doorbell, and when nobody answered right away, I knocked on the front door. Like 10 seconds later, the door opened up. The guy came out holding a baseball bat, and we backed away. Then a woman came out of the house as well, also holding a baseball bat. Mikey and I ran back for the car, and they chased us all the way there. I was afraid that they were going to try to whack my car or something, so I drove out of there as fast as I could. We were able to get away, and Mikey called the police on his phone and reported what had happened. We parked on the next street over as we waited for the police to get there. About 10 minutes later, they arrived. The police ended up knocking on the guy's door. He denied everything, but then he tried running away. I guess he had run-ins with the cops in the past, and some recently, so he didn't want to talk to the officers. I didn't see what happened, but I guess the police ended up getting into the house, and the guy and the woman got busted for drugs. They also recovered my cell phone, which I got back. That was one of the craziest experiences that I've ever had. Looking back though, I probably shouldn't have followed the guy. Knowing who he was now, he could have been dangerous. I don't think he knew I was following him, because if he had known, he might have tried to do something about it.
This story takes place about 5 years ago. At the time, I was a senior in high school. It was the spring semester, and it had finally gotten warm outside after the winter. I played basketball in high school, but our season was over by now. One of my favorite things to do was just hang out by the basketball hoop and practice. I would spend hours at a time by myself just playing basketball. The place I would usually practice at was the basketball courts they had at a park near my school. I lived really close to school and could walk there, so I'd often stop at this park on my way home and just hang out there until I felt like leaving. Usually, there wasn't any people there at all, and I would have the whole place to myself. One day after school, I stopped at the basketball courts with my basketball and started shooting around. I was there for maybe 20 minutes and by myself the whole time when I saw a car pulling up. I didn't think anything of it at all, but the car pulled up right to the closest parking space next to the basketball courts, which was only a few feet away from the three-point line at the court that I was at. I did find this strange, because the entire small parking lot was empty, and it annoyed me that they parked there. I kept playing and ignored them. I couldn't see the driver because of the angle. I would only be able to see if I had walked to the very end of the court and looked, which would have been obvious. I was wondering who it was or if they would get out, but they remained in the car for a good 10 minutes or so. Then I saw another car pulling into the parking lot, and this car parked next to the other one. But the way it parked was on the side of the car that was actually on the basketball court, which wasn't even a real parking space. Now this really annoyed me, and I went to the other end of the basketball court to shoot at the other hoop. I was over there for maybe a minute or two, when I heard doors to the cars open and shut. I didn't stop to look until I heard footsteps, and they seemed to be getting closer to me. Now I turned around and looked. I saw that there were two guys standing about 10 feet away from me. They both had longer hair and sunglasses on. As soon as I was facing them, they said to me that I needed to come with them. I asked them why, and then asked them who they were. One of the men replied by saying they did not want to have to hurt me. I knew then that I was in trouble. I knew they weren't police or anything like that, and I had no idea what they wanted from me. I had my basketball in my hand, and I threw it directly in the middle of the two guys as hard as I could. As I had released the ball, I immediately turned and began sprinting away from the men. My basketball missed them overall and sort of grazed one of the guy's arms. What it really did was give me just a moment to get a head start on running. They took off running after me, and I could tell they were not far behind. They seemed like pretty fast guys. However, being the athlete that I was able to quickly pull ahead a little bit and outrun the men. I made it to the end of the park and then to a residential street. From there, I turned to another block and then kept running. Soon, I had completely lost them. I was able to run for a long time without being tired, and kept going even after I had lost the men. Then I stopped and I walked home after that, but was very careful to check all of my surroundings. After that, I never went back to that park again, and I also never saw those men again.
When I was in high school, I played on the basketball team. I played several sports, but basketball was always my best one. During my senior year of high school, and sometime during the basketball season, is when this story took place. I remember that during that semester, I had an open hour where I did not have any class. This was common for seniors in my school. Sometimes you could go to school an hour later or leave early. But for me, I would go to the school and practice basketball. One of the gyms was always open because we had a few of them. There was no class in the back gym, or rarely ever a class there. I would just practice basketball and shoot hoops all by myself, which I really enjoyed. On this one day, it was like any other. I went to the locker room first and changed, then I went into the back gym. I would keep an eye on the clock as I practiced here and there. I know it was about halfway through the class period when I heard the intercom. There was a beep, and then I heard that the school was going into a lockdown. I wasn't really sure what to think at first. I thought that maybe it was a drill, but it also could have been real. I was already by myself in the gym, and I figured that it wouldn't matter if I just stayed there. The doors to the gym were already closed, but I had no ability to lock them or anything. I just kept practicing, thinking it wasn't that big of a deal and not taking it all that serious. I was dribbling and shooting in the back court when I heard a door to the other gym open. There was a large divider which separated the back court that I was in from another court next to me. That court was also empty and not in use at the time. I thought maybe it was a teacher entering. Somebody was going to tell me that I had to leave the gym or something. I picked up the basketball and held it, waiting for the person to reach me. They walked right up to the other side of the divider, but then stopped. There was probably just a couple of feet of space between the divider and the wall. You had to kind of move it to go around it to the other side. The person wasn't coming to this side though. I didn't see them at all either. I kept waiting. About a minute went past, and I could tell the person was right on the other side. I thought about saying something or going over there, but I decided not to. It seemed kind of weird. I walked back over to the locker room instead. I made my way out of the basketball court and through the doorways into the hallway. I didn't hear the person on the other side of the divider moving or walking at all as I walked out there. Then, I headed the short ways to the locker room. It was maybe like 40 feet. Obviously, nobody was out in the hallway. I reached the locker room, but after trying the door, it was locked. At first, I didn't really know what to do. I thought about going back into the gym, but then I decided to find another classroom. It was eerily quiet. There were no classrooms immediately nearby, so I had to turn to the left and go down that hallway for a little while. Finally, I was in the science hallway, and I found the first classroom. I knocked on the door several times. Soon, I saw the teacher look through the small window of the door and then open it for me. It was a teacher who knew me, which was good, and I was let into the class. I asked if anybody knew what the lockdown was about. I didn't really get an answer though. Soon, I would find out. About 20 or 30 minutes later, the lockdown was finally lifted. The class was let out, and we all went to our next hour classes. The word spread of the lockdown, and I found out it was because a man had broken into the school. He had been found hiding inside of the gym. It was then that I realized it was most likely the same person who had been on the other side of the divider in the gym with me. This is back when I was a high school freshman. I remember that during this time, I would get a ride to school with my older brother, who was a senior. We both played sports, but different ones. So one day, maybe a couple of months into the school year, we both had practice, but mine was early after school, and my brother's was later. When my practice got done that day, it was probably like 5 p.m., and my brother's practice was still going. All my teammates left except for one. One of my good friends on the team, Jack, was in a similar situation. His brother was also practicing. We sat around and were talking outside of the gym areas for a while. Then we got bored and decided to walk around. School had been done for hours, so at this point, Everybody was gone, and the place was almost completely empty. We started just talking and walking around random hallways, just kind of wandering around. We were both freshmen and still fairly new to the school, but knew most of the place pretty well. I remember after walking around for a while, we found this staircase that neither of us knew about. It was in an older wing of the school, and there were doors in front of the stairway, but one of the doors was open. We were both curious, so we walked inside and started going down the stairs. They led to, I guess, what was the basement of the school. I wasn't even aware that the school had a basement. At the time, I was thinking it probably wasn't used for anything except maybe storage. When we both got down there, it was really dark. Most of the lights were off, but we found this one switch and a few lights to the hallway turned on. It was basically just one hallway with a few rooms in it. We walked down it and were just looking around. I think we were both just surprised that we even had a basement in our school. We were talking to each other and just looking around when towards the end of the hallway we heard a door open. This really startled us because we had no idea that anybody else was down here. I mean, all the lights had been off and this place didn't really seem like it was in use. The next thing that I knew, this guy walked out from a room and into the hallway. We both didn't know who this guy was and did not recognize him. He clearly did not work for the school. He was wearing nothing that would indicate that he was a custodian either. The guy had really short hair and was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. He looked out at us but did not say anything. Then, after us both staring at each other for a few moments, the man started walking in our direction. The way that he was walking was sort of aggressive, if that makes any sense. As he was approaching, he told us to come to him. We both had a bad feeling about it though, and just turned around and quickly went back upstairs. After we had made it to the top, we both went away from that hallway. The man did not come upstairs and remained in the basement. We continued to walk far away. For the next 20 minutes or so, we walked up and down random empty hallways and talked about what had happened. Soon though, we got curious and decided to head back, not to go into the basement, but just to see into the hallway. When we returned, both of the doors leading to the basement were shut. I actually tried to open one, but it wouldn't open and seemed to be locked. We then walked away and headed back over towards the gyms. We then waited there until our brothers were done with practice. After that happened, I wondered who the guy was and what he was doing down there. I never saw him again. I also wasn't aware of the basement area being in any sort of use to the school during my entire time there, and I never went back down there again. This is an experience that I had when I was in high school. During that time, I played basketball, and this was during my sophomore year. I was on the junior varsity team, and one day after school we had practice. Now, my school only had a couple of gyms, and we had to share them with other sports teams. Because of this, our practice times would rotate. On this day in particular, we had the late time slot, which meant practice would go from 7 p.m. to 9:30. I rode the bus home from school in the afternoon, and then my parents drove me to practice later. That night, I remember that we got done with practice pretty early. I think it was over by like 8:45. My parents had been planning to get there to pick me up at like 9:45, so I wanted to text them to come earlier. I walked outside to the parking lot with a couple of teammates and said bye to them. When I tried to text my mom though, I saw that I had used up all of my data. My phone couldn't even send a text or call. This was frustrating, and I couldn't get on the school Wi-Fi because I remembered that they changed the password at the time. So I decided to walk to a Burger King that was nearby. There were a few businesses within walking distance of our high school. It was like a gas station, a library, a Burger King, and a small grocery store that was now closed. It took like 5 minutes to walk to the Burger King that was across the street and a little ways down. I entered the restaurant and saw that it was very quiet. I didn't immediately notice anybody else inside. I was also very hungry, having just got done with practice. I had a little bit of money I carried around for food and stuff, and I ordered something small and cheap to hold me over until I got home. Then I walked into the dining room area and sat down at a booth. After sitting down, I was able to connect to the Wi-Fi, and I texted my mom to let her know to come and pick me up now. I also told her to come to the Burger King and not the high school. My mom replied pretty quickly and said that she would be on her way now. This meant that she would probably be there in around 10 to 15 minutes. I looked around the restaurant and noticed that there was actually one other person there. In one of the booths in the back corner, a man sat by himself, except I couldn't tell any details about the man. He wasn't directly facing me, and he was wearing a sweatshirt with the hood up. He was leaning over with his hands on his head. He almost had the look of a kid who fell asleep in class. It seemed slightly sketchy to me, but not a big deal. I started playing some games on my phone and finished eating as I waited for my mom to arrive. Probably 5 minutes later, though, I happened to notice the guy again. He was sitting there in the same position, but then he stood up. When he did, I saw that he was very skinny and slightly tall. He then turned to face me, and I noticed that he was also wearing sunglasses. I looked away casually and back to my phone. I expected the man to walk out of the restaurant or something, but instead, I could tell that he was walking over to me. He kept getting closer and closer. I thought maybe he would go past me to exit, but when he got to me, he just stopped. Then, he sat down at the same booth that I was in, directly across from me. I was kind of creeped out. I looked up at him and couldn't tell if he was looking at me or not because of the sunglasses. I noticed he had long and stringy hair as well. After a few seconds, I said hi to the guy and asked how he was doing. He didn't answer me and just kept sitting there. This was really weird. After like a minute, he still wasn't leaving. I said that I was going to be going, and I said goodnight to the guy. He still said nothing. I just wanted to get away from him at that point. I got up and walked quickly towards the exit. The man was still sitting there, but as I was making my way to the doors, I noticed him standing up. After I left the Burger King, I began walking back over to my high school because I didn't really know where else to go. As I walked along the sidewalk, I soon noticed that the man had also left Burger King. He was now on the sidewalk walking behind me. He was maybe 50 feet back. I was really concerned. I made it all the way back to my high school parking lot, and by now, all of my teammates and coaches had left. The parking lot was basically empty, and the school was locked. I wouldn't be able to get inside. The only people there were janitors. When I got there, the man was still walking behind me. I didn't stop, though, and kept walking. I walked on the sidewalk, then went all the way around the school. When I got to the back of the school, things were really dark, and the guy followed me back there too. I quickly walked all the way back around the school again, and he was still trailing me. Soon, I made it back to the sidewalk, and didn't know where else to go. But that's when I saw my mom's car driving down the road and entering the Burger King parking lot. I started walking on the sidewalk again over to Burger King. I sped up my walking speed and checked behind me. The man was still there and still about 50 feet back. He had sped up the same amount that I did. I didn't know what he was doing or why he was following me. When I made it to where you crossed the road to go to Burger King, I just started running. I sprinted across until I had made it to my mom's car. I got inside and told her to leave quickly. She asked me what was going on, and I told her. Meanwhile, we looked, and the man was still approaching. He had just crossed the street and was starting to enter the Burger King parking lot. He wasn't running, but walking at a really fast pace. My mom then drove off before he could reach our car. The guy was left standing there, and I was happy to get away from him. After that night, I never saw him again. I don't know why he followed me or who he was, but I'm really glad that my mom showed up when she did.